It's Not Another Buffalo Podcast, hosted by three of the most underqualified sports personalities this side of the canal. With John.
All you people out there who are like, these idiots don't know anything. First of all, you're right. And second of all,
Pat.
I'm just a dad talking in a closet, but I'm just saying.
And Brando.
We have this trust built on whatever it is, like Bibles and gold bricks and whatever Brandon Bean's drinking over there.
all right, welcome back to Not Another Buffalo Podcast. I'm John. I'm here with my buddies Pat and Brando. Got the whole gang together here on a Tuesday evening. Just so you guys know, we have all kinds of accounts you can follow. Just search Not Buff Podcast on your favorite platform. As long as it's not Farmers Only, we'll probably show up. And I want to let you guys know this episode is brought to you by Small City Realty. Everyone knows it's a tough housing market right now. Feels like everyone and their cousin is becoming a realtor and friending us on Facebook with their realtor pages. But anyway, Zach, he's amazing at what he does. He's awesome to work with. So if you're buying, selling, or need help with property management in Western New York, call my guy, Zach Korzelius, at 585-409-1088. That's 585-409-1088. And I'll also throw his email in the show notes if you want to reach out to him that way. So Zach at Small City Realty, check him out. So anyway, how are you guys doing? I haven't seen you both at the same time in like 3 weeks, has it been? I've been rotating back and forth with the two of those. So you guys know that I've been talking tons of shit about both of you behind each other's backs, right? But not.
We're here to settle the beef right now.
It was weird last week not being able to do it. And I was really thinking, I was talking to my friend about this. I don't know, John, maybe you tell me, maybe when we first started this, I missed one. But that might be my first episode I wasn't on since we started this.
No, you said that last time we had that. But I'm pretty sure
when did I miss
I don't
one?
remember. Pat and I have done a couple episodes together here and there because we talked about as the
OG squad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. I remember.
What was that, like 2 episodes before Brando came on anyway? So.
And then we photo edited a picture of you without a bird on your shoulder.
Yeah, right. That bird bit on my Bills hat.
Oh my God.
Like that, well, it's been a while since we missed this time to talk. We were just talking beforehand. We just talked for 20 minutes because we hadn't seen each other in, virtually in a few weeks. So it's good to see you guys. I apologize for that. It was a crazy week, but it's good to be back. A lot to talk about for a summer episode.
Yeah. I'm surprised we get as many episodes in as we do with how busy stuff has been. Like when we started this, it was like, yeah, man, any night this week will work, and like now we've got so much has changed in the few years that this has happened. I mean, Pat's going to become a dad, if you guys haven't heard. So that's exciting. Brando's got 17 different jobs, and half of them are for the Bills and half of them are for, the education system and stuff like that. And he's coaching 17.
Of them are for a golf course.
A golf course. He's coaching 7 different teams. He's,
To elaborate, John, my life basically is exactly the same as what it was when we started this show. I started coaching like the exact same time as we started recording. A little bit of movement here and there. I'm definitely not as late as I was before. I'm a little bit more committed. I think I try to be, says the guy who missed last week. But yeah, Pat's life is different. John, I mean, you've moved since we started this. Your life is going. So
yeah, I was gonna say my background looks a lot better. We were able to start doing video. Like when this was audio only, like I was doing it in my bedroom. Yeah, so it's grown a little bit. Obviously, we've gone into the Rumblings era and out of the Rumblings era now. So
kind of like Steph Diggs versus not Steph Diggs era. Kind of lines up almost perfectly.
It actually kind of does.
Yeah.
And I was going to tie OJ into there too, but it doesn't seem appropriate. But anyway, Stanley Cup was awarded last night. I don't know if anybody saw it. Game 7. Hopefully I'll get this episode out soon enough so that, we're not already by Friday and you're sick about talking about the Stanley Cup and the Florida Panthers, however you feel about all those former Sabres. But Brendan, give me the head count. How many former Sabres on that Panthers team? Was it 5?
5. Yep. 5. Kulikov, Rodriguez, Montador, Oposo, and Reinhart. So can we talk about this for a minute? Because this is something that it's hilariously sad, but hilarious. We think this is outrageous also this year with 5. And then don't forget Evander Kane lost game 7 yesterday also. former Sabre. And just the last few years has been ridiculous. And this is going to lead into a question here, John. So we saw Eichel win. We saw O'Reilly win. This even goes back further. So we're talking about the pain of the Sabres. You know, I'm not one to be like, woe is me. I know a lot of people in Buffalo, oh, we lost 4 Super Bowls. All the refs are out to get us. All this is such a Buffalo thing. But like every single team has that. I was watching an E60 on the Rangers for their 94 Stanley Cup final series. And, you know, they were like, oh, this is just the Rangers. The way that they do this, they haven't won a cup in 40 years. This is just this is Rangers hockey. Or Vancouver, they lost game 7 in the finals and then they rioted. That was another E60. You can tell I watched them back to back because I'm talking about them back to back. But they're like, oh, Vancouver, it's just such us. It's typical Vancouver. And I'm like, oh, you know, every single sports city can have this. And if you're not Boston and you're not Chicago, I feel like it's, you know, the Red Sox and the Cubs, you know, those are the 2 iconic ones. But the Bills may be up there with the 4 Super Bowl losses. But now the Sabres are getting into history now with these franchises that are winning Stanley Cups. I mean, a freaking expansion franchise who's been around for 5 years wins before your 50-year plus organization wins. The Blues won one for their first franchise Stanley Cup. The Panthers are winning their first Stanley Cup. But this dates back. Let's go back for the Sabres history. And I know this is before our time, but Pierre Turgeon, number 1 overall pick for the Sabres. They had a good run. He, believe it or not, got traded. And people don't talk about it because we got Pat LaFontaine in that trade and we won, right? We won games. We did not win the finals because we lost to Dallas and no goal and all, you know, all that good stuff. But they won. They were competitive. You kind of forget about it. Then we got the greatest goaltender of all time, Dominik Hasek, in the 90s, back-to-back Hart Trophy MVPs, back-to-back. Could you imagine Allen going back-to-back MVPs and Hasek's doing it, carrying his team, loses in the finals? Guess what? Requests a trade next year, wins a cup with the Detroit Red Wings. Literally the next year, gets traded out of here. So this has been, you know, a lot of former players for other teams win. It happens every year in every sport. Veterans like Kyle Poso, Ray Bourque is a big one. You can go down the list for hockey, baseball, football, whatever. This franchise for the Sabres is just so beeped up. You know, put a swear word in there if you want to. You know, put a non-swear word in there if you want to be PG. But if you take a look, what changed, right? We're gonna how did we get here? And it all goes back to Drury and Briere leaving. I think it literally all goes back there. They've had this standard of we're going to be just good enough, and they had the all-stars, they had the talent. Thank God Drury and Briere didn't win a Stanley Cup after they left Buffalo. But Danny Briere has one of the highest points per game in the playoffs. Chris Drury went off in the playoffs and in his careers in Philly and in New York, respectively. But, you know, leading into the 2010, 2011, the last time the Sabres made the playoffs, you know, they weren't great. They won the division. They got bounced first round, and now it's just this stream of mediocrity and the longest playoff drought and a huge Stanley Cup drought. And it's tough. So you see these players, and part one for you, John and Pat, is, are you more upset about all the Florida Panthers on the former Sabres winning this year? Or because I'm kind of happy for him. I don't care. I didn't care. I kind of wanted to see history happen with McDavid, come back from 3-0. I wanted a Mount Rushmore moment, right? We want history to happen when we're watching. LeBron coming back from 3-1, you know, Steph Curry, greatest team ever. McDavid could have etched himself, if he didn't already with a record-breaking postseason, you know, he could have etched himself as the Wayne Gretzky heir apparent by willing his team back with broken ribs, which he came out with today and talked about. But you know, I'm not upset about that. I'm more upset that Jack Eichel won the cup. That's the one that stings me the most. The guy was kind of a douchebag when he left here, and the comments that he made. And the only moment that we got was when we beat Vegas the first time he was here. And, you know, Alex Tuch scores the empty net goal. That's like the highlight of Buffalo sports for a long time. Buffalo Sabres sports for a long time. But to have Ryan O'Reilly, Mike Shope just talked about this on the radio. Ryan O'Reilly, Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel, Evan Rodriguez, and Kyle Oposo were like their top 8 scorers, 5 of their top 8 scorers in 2018. And guess what that team's record was? Not great. It was like 25 and 57.
60 points or something like that.
25 and 57. Like, how can you be that bad? You know, and now these guys are contributing. Sam Reinhart, game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup final. Ryan O'Reilly, one of the best playoff runs from a two-way center, gets the Conn Smythe. Jack Eichel played very well in the playoffs last year. He was, on the ballot for Conn Smythe, doesn't get it. Then you got Robin Lehner, who gets a Vezina trophy. Yeah, I don't know if he officially gets a Stanley Cup. I don't know what his role was officially, but we're sitting here the way that we are, and you try to rationalize it all. So you guys take it away. I just talked for a long time, but I want to know which one hurts you the most. Is it Jack Eichel, Ryan O'Reilly, the Panthers, the Sabres as a whole? What is your status on this?
I think it's definitely Jack out of those couple players, but this whole thing is just like it's a +1 in the column of coaching matters. Like, for anyone who thinks that it's even in these sports like the NBA and the NHL, like, coaching really does matter, just as much as it does in the NFL, I feel like, which everyone knows that coaching matters in the NFL scheme. We talk about this all the time, but yeah, no, Jack definitely is the part of that hurts the most because of the way he left, because of the things he said, his attitude towards the fans. And of course we had that one little glimmer moment, which like really makes you feel small as a Buffalo fan when
Yes.
like, that's what I remember, how pumped up I was that night. I remember how much I was like, yes, like, and I'm like, if you're a fan who's not a Buffalo fan, you look at that and you're like, you're laughing. Like, that's us laughing at Miami fans who are like, they got their moment against the Bills in that heat where the Bills were, all cramping up and, injuries and couldn't finish the job on that game after 500 yards of offense. Miami fans had their moment there where they're laughing at Bills fans like, ha ha ha, and we're laughing at them because that's their moment of the last 5 years, so, or putting up 70 points. I don't know what, if that compares for them, but
So I saw this tweet. I don't know if you saw it also, but they were talking about the Dolphins, and it was like, since the last Dolphins playoff win, Tampa Bay went to the finals. Tampa Bay Bucks win the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay Lightning went to 4 finals, won 2 championships. Florida Panthers have gone to 2 finals. They won a championship. The Rays have had playoff appearances. The FC Miami signed Lionel Messi. Lionel, say his name for me. Lionel
Messi.
They signed Messi and win their trophy for their league. And all of this happened. And the Miami Heat, I think they've been to they went to 3 with LeBron and 2 with Jimmy Butler and then 1 with Dwayne Wade. So, and then they won a couple championships. So it's like, everybody's better than the Dolphins, but we're not throwing rocks from our glass house. So.
Yeah, exactly. Because you turn around and behind us is the Chiefs fan laughing at us when we're celebrating regular season wins against the Chiefs, and that's really all there is to that. But anyway, I want to talk about this in a larger light and relate it back to the Bills, because obviously, we're Bills podcast here, but I just think there's such a strong comparison when you look at the way that this Panthers team was built, and there's a lot of parallels that we can draw between Bills teams of the last few years. And so anyway, I'm going to take us back a couple of years with Florida Panthers history here. Brandon, correct me if I get anything wrong, but I've got a couple of notes here, so I'm going to try to do my best. Yeah. So 2022 season has just ended. Panthers decide that it's time to make big changes. New coach, new style, new players. Now, why is that surprising? Because 2021 to 2022 was their best season in franchise history. They won the President's Trophy, had the most wins in the NHL, and they led the NHL with 337 goals.
It's a lot.
So they blew it up because of how the season ended. Despite having that great regular season, they were ousted from the Stanley Cup playoffs in the second round by Tampa Bay for the second straight year. Same team, same round of the playoffs. Now, this time they were swept. The first time it was 4-2. This time they were swept. So when you're swept out of the playoffs and you feel like you're not even close, this was not like a 13 seconds moment or anything like that. You were just flat out outclassed. Big changes are needed. And so they traded away their 100-point player,
highest scoring player in franchise history,
and a king's ransom to get Matthew Tkachuk. The T is silent, right? It's Tkachuk.
Matthew Tkachuk, yeah.
Matthew Tkachuk, and who, ends up being really vital in their past 2 playoff runs. So fast forward to the next season after that, 22 to 23, lost in the finals to Vegas. Obviously, that's Eichel lifting the cup. And then 2023 this year, last night, 1-7 versus Edmonton. And so, like, how does this compare to the Bills of the last few years. Obviously, we have trouble getting past the same old team. It's Kansas City that's been beating us in the playoffs, whether it's, the AFC Championship game, 13 seconds, or this past year. We just traded away our second best player. Now, you could argue that we really didn't get as much in return because NFL trades and NHL trades are different, obviously, and the way that teams are built through the draft are, you can get a lot more in the NFL draft than you usually get in the NHL draft.
But not even...
It's a lot more immediately, but...
Sorry. Not even by a little bit. It's by like a ton. The NHL draft, if you don't have a top 15 pick, you're throwing darts at a dartboard across Lake Erie.
Yeah, and it's darts that you don't expect to contribute to your team for another 3 years at least. So
at least. Yeah.
So trades are that much more important in the NHL, right? And so Florida has built their team. What do they have? 3 draft picks on their team. So obviously you're not going to go out and. Yeah. But if you're going to compare it to anything, you might be able to compare it to the 2022 Rams and what they did. Sacrificing first round draft picks like they were $1 bills to try to get players on their team. But anyway, I wonder. I have this thought because obviously you can relate it to this season and next season, right? Because the lesson here is that you can never be too aggressive when it comes to making offseason moves. You can't just run it back year after year. Roster turnover is pretty high as it's ever been in all of sports, not just football. So there's nothing wrong with being too aggressive in the offseason. Florida could have run it back and be like, hey, we had the best regular season, had a tough playoffs. Let's see what we can do again next year. And that's what the Bills have pretty much been doing up until this past season, right? This has been the reset year. This has been the Mitch Morse off the books. This is the Stephon Diggs trade. But before that, they had the gang together. Hyde, Poyer, Trey White, like all those guys through injuries. I know. Jermaine Edmonds. They kept him through his 5th-year option, but didn't sign him after that. So anyway, obviously there's a reset year happening here. Obviously, we're kind of looking at a 2-year progress window now. But the thought crept into my mind that Diggs signed his extension in April of 2022, right after the Bengals game. Right?
I wouldn't say they called it an extension. They restructured his deal.
Are you sure that wasn't the extension? Because he only signed one extension with the Bills. I thought that was an extension in 2022.
Well, we can look it up, but I think it was a restructure. But the restructures often add a year, so he might have gotten an extension.
Well, I mean, he was making more money and like annually due to the restructure, though. Like,
right. So my thought is like, did the Bills run it back one season too many? So was this past year a bridge too far? Whereas going into last season, after the Cincinnati Bengals lost, if you sensed that Diggs was frustrated, would you have been better off moving him probably for a first at that point? Older guys like Poyer and Hyde, moving on from them a year earlier and trying to move up that timeline 1 year earlier. I don't know if this is exactly a Sean McDermott conversation, because obviously the Panthers fired their head coach after that season, as well as brought in a bunch of new players.
I think this is absolutely a Sean McDermott conversation. And I think, so first of all, let's clarify this. Diggs signed his 4-year deal April 2022.
Yeah.
So
that was an extension. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's when you pass the point of no return with breaking things down and building them back up at that point.
Well, the part about Florida is, and this is where the NFL and the NHL differ so much, is you need to have such top end talent to win in the NHL. You got to have a workhorse on offense and defense. You need a number 1 center who's a top 10 player in the league, and you need a top 10 defenseman in the league. You look at every single cup team that has won in the last 25 years, they all check those boxes. Most of the teams have 2.
So let me ask you this. Is the NFL any different than that?
So
give me, like, let's look at the past 4 Super Bowl championships or champions, right? Pat, you want to pull that up for me? Last 4 Super Bowl champions. Obviously, we can probably name them off. It's Chiefs. Then before
Rams.
That, it's
Bucks.
Chiefs, Rams.
Chiefs, Rams, Bucks, right?
Yeah.
So it's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, your superstars, right?
Yeah. Well, Tyreek Hill's on there.
And Chris Jones, Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill was already off by the time they won those 2 Super Bowls. But
I think you're right. They do need to have it, but the NHL is just so different because you even look at the Sabres, they have really good players. The Red Wings are a good example. They have good players, but they're like top 30 players in their position and they can't get into the playoffs. Like you need Tage Thompson to score 120 goals. But we talked about it. They had Jonathan Huberdeau, who's their like leading franchise all-time scorer coming off of a 110-point season, and you traded him. You traded the best player to ever suit up for your team for somebody better. Matthew Tkachuk is better. He is grimier. He is harder to play against. He's faster. He's tougher. He brings the style of hockey that like everybody thinks of when they think of hockey player. You know, Jonathan Huberdeau is a little softer. He's not as fast. He's not as exciting. And he's fallen off big time since the trade. Whereas Matt Tkachuk has elevated his game. And he's young. So the first comparable here would be the Bills going to get somebody. So if you get rid of Diggs, you trade your best player, you like Florida supplemented losing their best player by bringing in somebody better. And Florida also had a huge surround, like Alexander Barkov is a top 10 center. But the other part, these trades that we're talking about with Florida, they have a ton of top 5 picks from the NHL draft. And it's Barkov is a first round pick. Reinhart was 3rd overall. Ekblad was number 1 overall. I want to say they even have like Sam Bennett was maybe 3rd or 4th overall in the same year. You got Matthew Tkachuk. You go through their lineup, and it's chocked full of top 10 picks because they were able to bring in these guys or draft them themselves. But you got to have at least 1 or 2. I mean, it's kind of the blueprint. But with the Bills, you know, you have a guy in place right now at owner and at head coach that brought stability. Whereas, I mean, Florida was kind of like Buffalo. You know, they had a hard time down in that Southern hockey market, and they finally started to get a breath of fresh air. But coaching is different because the coach in hockey, it matters more during practice. Like you need to make a good practice. You got to have good practice habits. You talk about Casey Middlestat going to his first practice in Colorado, leaving Buffalo. He's like, whoa, it's a different level here just in practice. And your coach in hockey dictates line changes and matchups, who they play against each other, and like when to pull the goalie, when to challenge offsides. A coach in football, every single play is impacted by the coach in football. So to see the difference that a new coach made for Florida, it's the conversation that we in Buffalo have had in the last couple of years is what would it look like without Sean McDermott if we had somebody else besides Sean McDermott? The NHL has, you know, this is true in all sports, but this roundabout way of hiring these recycled old coaches. And I want to say the coach for Florida, you'd have to remind me his name, was the coach that has coached the most games in the league before he won a Stanley Cup. And now it's Lindy Ruff, I think, is the next one. So this guy worked real hard to, who has not gotten one. This guy worked real hard to get here, got the right opportunity, got the right blend of players, but it was enough to get him over the hump. And the comparison with McDermott, you know, how long are you going to give him? They brought in new players. They got a new coach. We're bringing in new players, but I feel like in football, you need this coach to mold those new players because he's still kind of good. So I don't know.
That's like Doug Collins versus Phil Jackson, though. Like Phil Jackson, like you have Doug Collins takes the Bulls to, you know, the playoffs 3 years in a row and, you know, gets canned, and Phil Jackson year 2 wins, you know, the NBA finals with basically the same roster. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's also like you were saying about, I guess I don't understand hockey, like business stuff very well, but like how you're talking about, like they're compiling a lot of top 5 picks. So it sounds like it's a lot of players that were drafted by other teams high and maybe their careers didn't pan out as well as, you know, they could have, as opposed to like a I don't know, like Ricky Williams, Herschel Walker situation where you're, you know, trading your bell cow for 7-8 picks. You're talking more about like, I guess also recycling or looking into players that are drafted higher.
Absolutely.
Yeah, throwing picks to the wind for players who are already proven in some respect.
But you have a guy like Reinhart who was drafted 3rd overall to be a star, who was a good player with Jack Eichel. 30 goals, 30 assists, you know, 60 points, a little less than a point per game. Good player, wanted to be in Buffalo, said I'll sign a contract. Give me 6 years, $6 million a year, $36 million deal. And Buffalo wouldn't offer it to him. So Florida trades for him for a first round pick and Devin Levi. And the dude lights it up, 57 goals this year, 110 points. the Stanley Cup winning goal. So it's just something like that. He took a double step. He doubled his production on a new team. Ryan O'Reilly, same thing. In his regular season production, it's the same thing. Eichel was about the same. He just had a better surrounding cast. But Evan Rodriguez, Jack Eichel's line mate at Boston College, he scored a few points here, but who thought he was going to lead the Stanley Cup final in goal scoring? Like nobody. So Kyle Posko did score a goal. He was just there. And Brandon Montour, he was great. He was great on the offensive end and defensive end. These players just got better somewhere else.
So that's a point in the favor of new environments, right? New environments, fresh environments, like it's mental, right? And so you can either watch those players go elsewhere out of a stale environment into a fresh environment and thrive and become the best version of themselves, or it takes a lot more for like an organization like the Bills, like the Sabres are failing at this right now. I mean, I think they're on the uptick, but like as a fresh organization, like the Sabres feel stale right now. Like they're getting less stale than they were the past few years.
Much less stale, I think, in the last couple of years.
But I guess is the question, are the Bills, what's the trajectory on the Bills right now? I think the season is going to tell us a lot, whether it's heading up or if the Bills are starting to get a little bit stale because, psychologically, when you keep running it back, like you're probably going to get similar results. It's tough to, especially without, that frustration builds on you and it takes, not just a kick in the pants, but like a little bit of a change of scenery. So does that change of scenery come from the players, which there will be a major change of scenery on this roster. So we'll see if that's enough of a breath of fresh air and, rather than, the ultimate change of scenery, which is the change of head coach. And when we kind of started this offseason, obviously we're looking at this as a 2-year window, right? Like this year is the get all the dead money off the books in 1 year, do with what we got. And next year, cap's going to go up. Obviously, they're going to have tons of space. They're going to be able to sign a guy like Brandon Ayuk if they wanted to and have the money to do it. So I've always kind of looked at it as a 2-year window, but I don't think that Sean McDermott's seat is like completely cold for this entire season because
it shouldn't be.
It's like, it's not going to depend right down to wins and losses, but it matters what it looks like, right? It really matters what it looks like, what the room feels like, because again, it's all about the trajectory that you're on. If you go 11-6, but everyone in that locker room feels optimistic, they can make a little bit of a playoff run, they overachieve from what they're expected, and that's probably the biggest metric that we can probably measure it with at all. Then it's going to be like, okay, run it back next year, bring in a superstar. But if that's not the case and it's on a downward trajectory and you need that breath of fresh air combined with Sean McDermott might just not be the guy to get you through those clutch situations, as we talked about last week. Like I put a poll up on Instagram after we put out that episode, and I put a poll in a couple of places. Like, what do you think the number one factor is why the Bills haven't won the Super Bowl in the last 4 years?
Sean McDermott.
Far and away, coaching was the number one
100%.
answer. So,
well, and I mean, the control environment is going to be interesting now too, because you're going into this year with, I guess Joe Brady, being a coordinator for 60% of the season. But if you have a different OC and a different DC this year, and the results are still similar, survey would say, I guess, that.
Right. And it's tough because the other variable, you talk about the control group. The other the roster's way different too. So that's like another variable to add into it too. So we're just going to have to do our best to pick that apart. Right. But yeah,
we talk about this a few times on this show. After a game like 13 seconds, you lose the trust of your coach. You lose the trust of the people around you. And your choices are change the players or change the coach, right? You got to find a way to bring trust back in. These new guys have no idea what happened in that locker room. They didn't hear Sean McDermott's comments. You talk about the Tyler Dunn piece and all these things. You got a ton of new faces in here. You look at Florida, they lost in the Cup final. They needed players to play differently. Jonathan Huberdeau doesn't play the same way as Matthew Tkachuk. And we're talking a lot of hockey here for football fans, but Matthew Tkachuk is a bulldog on the ice. He will run you over. He will smash you over the glass. He will dangle you through your legs and score a highlight reel goal. And Jonathan Huberdeau might dance along the wings a little bit, but two very big different styles. And they changed their coach and players because it didn't fit what they needed. And we just got to take a second back here. I got to take a step back here because, John, you said, are the Bills stale? Are they going to be stale? Now, this Buffalo Bills team will never be stale with Joshua Patrick Allen at quarterback. This Buffalo Bills team with Josh Allen at quarterback is like opening up a fresh bag of sweet, spicy chili Doritos and taking that first full Dorito out, that freshly flavored.
I'm gonna put an at.
Go ahead.
No, finish your description. You got too far into it.
Sweet and spicy, son. That's the elite
that
flavor.
Sweet and spicy chili, that perfect Dorito triangle with all the flavoring on it. And you take that first bite. That's Josh Allen on this Buffalo Bills team. They'll never be stale.
Oh my God.
But
if you're not watching it in video form, you gotta YouTube.
I do think that there's a point to be made there, because I think there's meat on the bone. When you trade Steph Diggs for a second round pick, there needed to be another move. And we got Keon Coleman, but there's not a Brandon Ayuk. There's not a Samuel from the 49ers. There's not a, Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's not a replacement at his caliber or better like there was in Florida. You got rid of a star for a superstar. So that's the part that is up for me.
So two things. I have a follow-up question to that, but before I get to that, I just want to say, you can have a superstar quarterback and things can go stale. Green Bay is a great example of this. They changed the coach. That didn't do it. And even after that, things went stale. So it's still a possibility. And obviously, the factor in that is Aaron Rodgers was probably the problem in that locker room. But so there's that.
I would also
I'm just saying, you can't, obviously Josh Allen is the best thing that we have going for us, but you have to put a great roster around him. I mean, otherwise Josh Allen would have a Super Bowl every single year he's gotten into the league or gotten closer. The shortcomings have been coaching and, and injuries. So it's it matters the players you have around you. The best quarterback doesn't always win the Super Bowl.
So I might argue with you a little bit about Green Bay being stale, because Aaron Rodgers won back-to-back MVPs before he left, throwing to Devontae Adams and nobody else. No picks were ever used to make his side of the job easier. And I want to say there was a little bit of discrepancy on a play call in a game that got them eliminated. Aaron Rodgers wanted to throw it, and Matt LaFleur wanted to run it or kick the field goal, and that was what started it, the whole thing.
Isn't that the definition of becoming stale, though?
Back-to-back MVPs, you're in the playoff games and you're still playing great. I don't think that's stale.
Is that the bar, though?
I think having the success...
I think the Super Bowl is the bar if you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, right?
If he's playing Adams at an MVP level all season, I don't think that's it. But the part that I would agree with you, I think as long as you have him, just as long as the Bills have Allen, as long as they get there, they might get one. They might get through.
But the Packers never made it back.
They never made it back. Yeah.
The Packers never made it back.
Yeah. I mean, he played, I guess, in 2 Super Bowls. I mean,
as a Packers fan, are you holding his MVP trophies?
Yes. I'd hold Josh's.
But anyway, I don't know. The goal is the Super Bowl, and they never made it. They're not. I mean, again, it's a totally different situation here with Jordan Love. I think they're on the upswing again because there's freshness there, but it got stale. It got to the point where Rodgers wasn't going to be able to stay on that team for 5 more years, and they weren't going to have another show. They needed to make changes in some form or fashion, because with those MVPs, I mean, they didn't just run it back. They couldn't just run it back because that was not going to get over the hill. That roster with Aaron Rodgers was not going to win the Super Bowl the next year because stuff got stale. So I don't know. I like Josh Allen getting back-to-back MVPs. Sign me up for that today. But if they're losing in the AFC Championship game to the same team over and over again, what's the variable you're going to change? Yeah. It's got to be something. But anyway, to get back to my other follow-up question. Right. So obviously, Kachuk coming in is the piece that really put them over the edge. And
Reinhardt, those two together.
Yeah, and Reinhardt. So the situation is with Buffalo, they have future first-round picks that are more valuable that they could probably trade for superstar players, right? The return on Diggs, he was getting older. His contract was a little bit of a dead weight too. So the best you were going to do was a second-round pick. You weren't going to be able to just straight up trade Stephon Diggs for a Devontae Adams or a Brandon Ayuk, right? That's not the situation in the NFL. But how possible or even realistic is it for us to expect the Bills to be the best team in the AFC without adding one more superstar to this roster? Because like, well, who's the next biggest star on this team besides Allen? Like, who's number 2?
James Cook.
Oh,
Matt Milano. James Cook, third in the year in the league in rushing.
Matt Milano, Deion Dawkins, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, Von Miller, if he comes back to
that's a huge if, because he sucked last season. Like
it's got to be Matt Milano, probably, and maybe Terrell Bernard. Now
at the linebacker position, right?
Yeah,
Which is like less important than all these.
A third-year player drafted in the 3rd round too. I mean, yeah, I guess we're really grasping at straws, but
that's a good point, John. Go ahead, Pat. Sorry.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. I couldn't come up with a solid second number 2 though. Honestly, I don't know.
That's a good question.
It's always been Diggs, right? And what happened to when Diggs started to fall off?
So I did read an SI article though earlier today, and they named 10 possible first-time NFL Pro Bowlers this year, and they did have a Buffalo Bill on that list. I don't know if you guys.
Khalil Shakir, right?
No, I would have thought Shakir, but this is
offense or defense? Was
defensive.
it TB? Was it Terrell Bernard?
Christian
Which
Benford.
is interesting. Yeah,
Christian Benford. Yeah.
So who knows? We can see where he's at end of the year.
That's true. He's a bright spot.
The also tough part about it is Connor McDavid, Matthew Tkachuk, and well, especially Barkov. These elite players play defense at an elite level as much as their offense at an elite level. You can't put Josh Allen at linebacker. And I think the other part is
not according to WGR callers. You can't.
Yeah. Whatever. But everybody has an opinion. It's fine. Listen to our show. Tell us what you think. Anyways, but I think even having Connor McDavid scoring 42 points in 23 games, you still need so much more help as a hockey player. I mean, he played the whole 3rd period yesterday and he didn't have help. And I think because you rotate lines, your shifts are only a minute long in hockey. It's not like basketball where LeBron's playing all 46 minutes or Steph playing 46 minutes. But in football, the football quarterback as an offense, I think, I don't know if this is a hot take. Maybe I'm so wrong. But I think out of all the sports, I think the quarterback needs the least help to be successful. Outside of the offensive line, your placement on the...
You're already putting asterisks underneath.
I know,
your
but
take.
I'm trying to think, because if you have a mobile quarterback, you talk about drafting a guy, and if he can run, he already has a huge advantage because most of the rookies are coming into a bad offensive line. So you like to think that, you look at what Josh did with lesser talent, and he was a playoff quarterback still, and you can throw to receivers that are average because you have a good quarterback and you can trust your arm, you're accurate. You might just need a one-trick pony to run deep, or you need specialized players to do specialized things because your quarterback is special. We're going to roll with that. And keeping the ability to move the chains. He can do that himself. He can run from pressure if the O-line breaks down. And once it's a scramble drill, the talent, it's him. The receivers all have a run to the sideline. That's their coaching point, and it's all up to Allen. So I think having a quarterback like Josh at that talent level is much more important than having Connor McDavid on the Oilers or, it's probably only hockey because basketball, the players play the whole game. So it's just the players that come on and come off. So in that analogy of hockey versus football, Josh might not have the roster that he's had before, and we might think it's stale. But Josh Allen is a fresh bag of Doritos, man. I'm just telling you, he's gonna be so good. Like you're gonna prop that bag open, and he's gonna be running.
I said
all
it
over the
before,
place.
and I'll say it again. We're gonna win the Super Bowl with the roster. I'm telling you. But mid roster.
You never know how it's gonna go, right? But I mean, he's had good pieces around him already, and that hasn't been enough. Like, are we trying to convince ourselves that if you take away and you give him less, that's going to make the difference? Like, I think it has to look different in some way. I think that maybe if you want to convince yourself of anything, you try to convince yourself that some of those pieces that were core to this team really fell off because of old age. Yeah. And they weren't good enough, and we were overhyping them because of what they were. the Mitch Morses, the Micah Hydes, the Jordan
Mitch
Poyers.
Morris was good. You want to talk about
I agree with that. I'm not trying to make that point. I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to convince yourself of that, then maybe that's what you tell yourself, that a bunch of young guys coming in is going to be a breath of fresh air. And it's probably a combination of both, right? Like, you got older on the back end, the safeties coming in, you're probably going to, have a fall off in experience, but you might get a crazy athletic play out of stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think that Brandon, your point is probably right, that having the great quarterback is the most important piece, but a quarterback with no help around him probably isn't going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I think of Deshaun Watson in Texas going 4-12 and leading the league in passing, but I don't know. It's tricky because you're giving that argument, and those players that were here because we ran it back so much, they lost in the AFC Championship game in 2021 in their primes. They just weren't good enough, and coaching might have held them back then. And it hasn't evolved, and the players and the coaching haven't found their life cycle together, because it's like the coaching.
Yeah, they've been on different stages, right?
Yes. Like Sean McDermott has needed this time to develop, and the players were already there and they were let down by their coach. And now when the coach finally knows what he's doing, the players are too old to do it.
Right.
So.
And the Cole Beasleys and Emmanuel Sanders are off the roster or too old at that point too. Yeah. So when you had that really, really elite receiving core in 2021 and 2020 that we haven't really seen since. And so Pat and I were talking about that a lot last week.
One more question for you, and we can keep it quick because we're talking coaches here, and we're talking about the Panthers firing their coach, bringing in a new guy. What do we do with Sean McDermott? Now, the Bills have a win now roster as of last year. It more, like we said, it has changed to win in the future for the roster. But I look at the Lakers hiring JJ Redick, and he has
middle school basketball.
Yeah, I mean, he played at Duke. He has had a lot of good coaches, but he is a first-year head coach learning the job with a win now roster. But it is not the talent of the other rosters. So he's kind of in a tough spot, and you don't want to put. I think if you brought in a new Bills coach, they might kind of be in the same boat as somebody like JJ Redick, where you have your superstar LeBron and Allen, and this team is expected to compete, but you don't want to go through the rookie head coach gaffes again. And JJ Redick is going to have to balance the expectations of winning without really knowing what he's doing. So and again, or we talk about retreads. The Panthers got another guy that rode the wheel and won a cup. So what do you want with McDermott, right?
My question for you, though, I guess then is, like, if you're splitting hairs, really, like, what exactly is a rookie head coach? Because then are you talking someone who was a coordinator previously, or are you talking someone who is a college football coach, and then is making that first step into the NFL? Because I guess, like, when we hire Sean McDermott, he was, a first-time head coach. Like, and then you kind of go and, I guess that's like a slippery slope too, because then you talk about the Harbaugh brothers, like, there's a lot of different, Jimmy Johnson, first time NFL coach, year 4 wins it. Like, so I guess, I don't know. I mean, for every Bill Belichick, there's a bunch of guys, like you said, in the NHL that just keep getting recycled from, coaching teams that lose in the first round every year.
Being a first year head coach in the NFL, I think, though, like, people want that. You want DeMeco Ryan. You want
Ben Johnson.
Because I mean
Ben Johnson.
That's my other point is, and like that's what I was talking to my dad, and that's what I was telling him is, like, and not to say, like, whatever. I don't really care. Everyone, people will say Pat's ageist, so I don't really care. But, like, I mean, I feel like, I don't know. Well, that's what I was talking to my dad about, and he was like, why would Bill Belichick want Gerard Mayo to, take over for him? And then I was talking with him, and I was like, well, imagine Bill knows what's happening. Like, think you're CJ Stroud, right? Do you want to be coached by Bill O'Brien, who's old, who, doesn't have experience, recently playing in the league, is someone who can't relate to you? Or do you want someone who's younger, someone who's been involved in, the game as a player a little bit more recently? And not to say JJ Redick's going to be a stud right away, but if the Buffalo Bills were to go with a different head coach, I would like to, see them go with someone significantly younger, kind of in the vein of, OJ
Ben
Mayo, where
Johnson.
you're still having Matt Johnson.
Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson.
Lions offensive
He's
coordinator.
still my pick, man. He's the only one I'd get rid of McDermott for. McDermott, when he was hired, was like the fourth,
42.
third youngest head coach in the league.
Go younger. He's run his course. He's run his course.
Well, if there's any doubt if Pat was a little bit ageist, I think we have our proof here.
Go younger. I mean, I'm not saying. Well, survey would say it doesn't really matter if you can't run the length of a football field and are twice to three times the age of your players. I guess it doesn't really matter.
There's really no correlation when you look at, especially because Andy Reid's going to throw whatever wrench you have. And there's also, it's like survival of the fittest here too. So the oldest coaches have been around for long, which means they're probably doing something right and they're not out of the league in their 40s. So,
and they make those relationships to where they can keep being brought back. You look at the retreads. They get fired, they get hired again a couple years later as another head coach, whatever.
Right. And there's a limit to that, right? Like, there's a little bit of, whatever you want to call it, nepotism. I don't know what you call it if you're not related.
Cronyism.
The boys club, but, obviously, you got, what's his name? Wade Phillips with the donuts. He's in the XFL. These days he's not still in the NFL. And if it truly was like 100% of that, but.
Matt Rule starring in a sitcom somewhere.
He coaches for
Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith is a great
Arkansas.
example. Obviously, Arthur Smith has been fired since, but Arthur Smith being a coach in the NFL for as long as he was, which I think was only 2 years, was probably 2 years too many. So, Pat, you look offended. Do you like him because he had a mustache? You have a mustache right now?
No, I was just thinking about Arthur Smith working with the carpet cleaner himself. I was thinking about they had a good run together.
Guess where Arthur Smith is
Mike
now,
Vrabel
John?
had a good run.
Arthur Smith, I don't know. What is he?
Just stereotypical team that was
Arthur Smith brought
Smith.
Tanny back to relevance. Just have to.
I'm gonna guess Alabama offensive coordinator.
No, he's in the NFL.
Is he coordinator?
Yes.
Pittsburgh? He's in Pittsburgh, isn't he?
Pittsburgh. Yeah.
He's probably got some
good.
Mike Tomlin connection or something.
Yeah. Who doesn't?
Just remember, Arthur Smith brought Tanny back to relevance. So that's all I'm saying. That's the point of offense right there. But
anyway, hey, I added some quick trivia when I was doing all this NHL research. So I'm going to throw this in here in our NFL crossover episode. So out of the 49 Jack Adams Awards for Coach of the Year in the NHL, there's been 49 given out. How many of them? You don't have to name coaches. I don't know the Coach of the Year from last year. I don't know who won it this year.
This is a fun
I didn't even know that Lindy won it once. I forgot about that.
For New Jersey, right?
No, he won it for the 05-06 Sabres, I think.
Really?
He won by 1 point over the guy Peter Laviolette, I think, who used to coach for Nashville and a bunch of other places. Anyway, out of the 49, you just have to guess a number. You don't have to guess names. Out of those 49, how many were American born? Do you think?
6.
Pat,
None.
you have a guess?
None.
Two. One guy, John Tortorella, won it twice, and Dan Bylsma, former Sabre coach, won it with the 2010 to 2011 Pittsburgh Penguins.
Dan Bylsma.
Is he coaching Utah now? Is he the Utah head coach for next year?
Have they picked a name? Are they the Yeti? Are they the Utah Yeti?
They put in a whole bunch of trademarks. Now, it's super interesting. I saw a headline from Utah's sports section where it highlights Dan Bylsma's resume, and there was not one picture
of the Sabre stuff.
Of the Sabre stuff. It just didn't exist. It just blanked away for that time where he was coaching Stanley Cup champions on this team, and he sucked.
Oh, Brandon, I'm so sorry I cut you off halfway through there. I was like, wait a second. Utah has a sports section?
It was I
know they have the Jazz
outline of the sports section.
Well, they didn't even name the Jazz though. They got them from New Orleans. They were the New Orleans Jazz. They just didn't even change the name.
I didn't know that.
That makes it really one of the weirdest sports names out there.
Mormons don't listen to jazz.
You should take a look at that list, John. And there's an interesting stat because I want to say a bunch of them also get fired maybe the second or third year after they win the Coach of the Year.
Right.
Again, NHL coaches.
But Yeah, they really go around. Like guys go and come back. Obviously, Lindy. I mean, we wouldn't be hiring back. Like obviously, no one would. But like Dick Duran coming back to the Bills would be like really effed up, right?
You got to find it's different Lindy, because he played.
If you had
he
success,
played for the Sabres.
That's what I'm saying.
And
like
he was successful.
I'm just saying like that same kind of cycle in the NHL. And I feel like it's this way for basketball coaches as well. Like coaching cycles feel shorter a lot of times. Like, you know,
the expectations are higher. I think a good example for this one would be Alex Van Pelt coming back to Buffalo.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But no, I'm excited about Lindy. I think Don Granato was necessary, right? Don Granato, really great at coaching young players, got the best out of Thompson, turned Thompson into a Josh Allen-like superstar for that 1 year. And obviously, he needs to come back to that. But like, my hope is that McDermott is the coach that's going to get us there, because I'm impatient and I want it this year and not 2 years from now. I just hope that we're not looking back at this and saying Sean McDermott was exactly like the Don Granato, where we needed him to take that step, but it's time for somebody else to take the reins and take him over that final hump. So my final thought with this is just like, if it's broke, don't be afraid to take bold action to fix it. Like,
well, my question for you though, John. So this happens a lot though too. Within the whatever Sid Barrett to David Gilmour, you have one of your boys internally take the spot. Is there a strange situation where someone is promoted internally to replace Sean McDermott? And if so, who?
If the Joe Brady offense looks amazing, maybe.
That's tricky.
If you're looking at a regime type change, then it's probably not just take the head coach. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it could be something like that. But I mean,
I'll give you a quick example in the hockey world when that happened. Mike Babcock left Detroit to go to Toronto, and they hired Jeff Blashill, who was their AHL head coach. This happens more often in hockey. And I don't know about the G League. I'm sure some of those coaches get brought up, but Jeff Blashill took over for Mike Babcock, and he made the playoffs once and got fired after having one of the worst head coaching records ever as a coach. So I would be curious to see how that would work and the relationships that it might mess around with. But because then you're stuck. Because what if Joe Brady is really good and then you clean house and you don't give him the job, and now you need an offensive coordinator again, and it's just you're running around in circles. So it's
that's the reality of having and sorry, my camera died, so I'm audio only for the rest of the episode. But that's the reality of having a defensive-minded head coach, because if you get an amazing offensive coordinator, you're not going to hold on to him for 10 years like the Chiefs have in Andy Reid, right? Yeah. Because that person's going to go and become a head coach. So that's one of the pitfalls of having a defensive-minded head coach is like, but again, I guess you're not changing out defensive coordinators all the time. So there's the flip side of that. But anyway, do you guys got any more final thoughts?
Fun fact about Lindy Ruff: has never won a Game 7 in the playoffs. Has lost 3 of them, I believe.
Well, that stinks.
Yep. And they did a meet and greet. Bulldog was talking about this on WGR, where players get to ask questions, or fans get to ask questions. They're at a bar or whatever. Somebody asked Lindy, what is a Game 7 like? And he's like, well, I haven't won one. And he said leading into, I want to say he lost Carolina for Buffalo. He lost one in Dallas and one in New Jersey. And he called Scotty Bowman, because Lindy played for Scotty Bowman. And he's like, what can I do differently to win a Game 7? And Scotty's like, well, I just kind of let my guys have the morning off. Kind of get them away from the rink, whatever. Don't do a morning skate. But it didn't work because he lost. So that's all. Fun fact, Lindy Ruff.
Well, Sean McDermott's never won his last game of the season as well as a head coach. Actually, he did once. What would be the example of that? What?
Oh, what? He's won the last game of the season a bunch of times, dude.
I mean, he got to the Super Bowl with the Panthers, right?
No. You mean as a head coach?
Yeah, but you mean like the regular season or?
No, like their full season, including playoffs.
Yeah.
Because only one team ends the season on a win in the playoffs. Yeah. But
I still think the Super Bowl should be a best of 3 series.
It'd be entertaining.
I don't think that would be physically possible, but anyways.
No. But anyway, all right. Well, we're gonna get out of here. Thanks for sticking with us through 60 minutes, because it was a good topic. I liked it. So. definitely good content for June, right? So, but anyway, you guys can find us on all platforms at Not Buff Podcast. We'll be back next week talking more Bills again. Would love if you like, share, subscribe, do all the stuff, press all the buttons, make the algorithm feel good for us. And we'll be back next week, and go Bills.
Go Bills.